All right. So thanks everyone for joining us today. My name is Andy Cabasso, and today we're going to be talking about best practices for cold email outreach. If you have any questions at all during this webinar, please feel free to use the Q&A section, and we will get to those questions as soon as we can. This is also going to be a bit interactive, and we're going to have a few polls as we want to get some feedback from you and get your input so we can better tailor this to your to kind of like what you're looking for. To a quick question, this webinar will be recorded and we will be sending out the recording link likely sometime tomorrow. So let's dive in. So first, who am I? My name's Andy Cabasso. I'm a co-founder here at Postaga. I also manage our in-house outreach team. We do a lot of outreach, not only for ourselves, but also for some other agencies and businesses through our Done For You outreach program. So we do a wide variety of types of outreach, from outreach for link building to PR and sales. So I'm going to cover a lot of different topics related to outreach. Also, in a former life, I used to be a lawyer, but I'm not practicing anymore. And I also previously started and then grew and then sold a digital agency. So I'm very familiar with the digital agency space. So next up, let's kind of talk about what we're going to talk about today. So I'm talking about best practices for cold outreach. I'm going to be talking about everything from setting up your outreach to email deliverability to prospecting to pitching and lead management. And then at the end, we will do a Q&A. But like I mentioned before, if you have any questions that come up, please feel free to ask them in the Q&A section of this webinar, and I'll make sure that we get to those during our Q&A. So first, I want to open this to a poll. I want to know more about you. Are you currently doing any cold outreach now? It's going to pop up for you. The options are yes, no, or I'm not doing cold outreach now, but I have in the past. So I want to just learn a little bit more about all of your experience with cold outreach, as it kind of will help me better to tailor some of the materials to you. All right, and the poll is now open. So if for any reason you're not looking at the screen, I've got the poll out here. So please fill in your response, and we're going to close this poll in just a few more seconds after we get some more responses. All right. And 5 more seconds, and I'm going to close this out. So if you haven't responded yet in the poll, please do. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. So results for that. It looks like about a little over half are currently doing outreach now. About 20% are not, and about a quarter are not currently, but have done so in the past. That's good to know. Thanks for sharing that. So next up, I want to talk about setting up your cold outreach campaigns. So, with setting up your outreach, really the first thing that we need to figure out is our email sending domains. I get a lot of questions about this, and so I'm really excited to talk about this. Mainly, like, should I be using my regular everyday email address? So my everyday email is andy@postaga.com, but I do not use that for any cold email outreach that I'm doing for a few reasons. In particular, as a safety precaution, in the event I send out, my sending patterns get bad and my deliverability gets bad, I don't want my cold emailing to affect my main email that I'm using every day. So as like a best practice, I recommend using either an alternate domain or also possibly a subdomain. So for an alternate domain, it might be something like, if your domain is website.com, using website.co or website.net or something like that. Or as far as like a subdomain, like m.website.com or outreach.website.com. That's like what I mean by a subdomain. Another question is like, can I use like a domain, something like @gmail.com because it's free and it's easier? I generally don't recommend it. I know plenty of people do, but I think from what I've seen, I think you're getting better response rates from sending at a particular domain. I wouldn't recommend using like @Gmail or @Outlook or anything like that. In terms of email setup, so we need to, like, let's say you bought your domain, you have your domain, you bought it with, I don't know, Namecheap or GoDaddy or Cloudflare or what have you, and now you need to get an email address to send your outreach emails from. We recommend, like, getting an email with any provider. You can use, Google Workspace, you can use Office 365, you can use Zoho. Any of them are fine. I know some people, some people are like recommending, some people have seen like better results or better deliverability with Office over Google Workspace. I don't have numbers on that, but a colleague of mine, he swears by Office 365 in particular. Let's see. So how many email addresses should you use? This is another common question. So you can use multiple emails at multiple domains. I know some people who do a lot of outreach at scale, they will have multiple domains, some that they're not using, but like on standby, like in case one of their domains, their deliverability drops and they're seeing that their emails are going to spam. Well, they need to keep going. So what they'll do is they'll just like rotate out that domain and rotate in another domain. But this also depends on kind of like the volume that you're looking to send. If you're doing like lead generation outreach and you want to reach like thousands of people per day, in that case, you are going to need a lot of inboxes to send from. In particular, because as in general, like as like a best practice for like sending volume, use like if you're with platforms like Google Workspace or Outlook, the like maximum recommended amount of emails to send per day is around 50 or so. Some platforms differ. Some platforms you can send 100 a day without too much of a problem. But like even so, if you're sending 100 a day and you want to send 1,000 pitches to 1,000 different people a day, that's a bunch of domains that you'll need. In terms of using different email accounts at the same domain, possibly. But if the domain overall like runs into deliverability issues where it's like on any like spam lists or things like that, that can affect your overall domain. So talking about email deliverability, this is kind of an important aspect of outreach, making sure that our emails are going to people's inboxes. You don't want to spend all that effort to come up with your prospect list, to find people's email addresses, to craft the right pitch, and then get a low reply rate. And you're like wondering like what's going on. Like I have no idea. I have no idea like why this is. Like I have no idea why this, like my emails aren't getting read or replied to, and I'm spending all this effort. chances are like it could be because of low deliverability, and you don't want that to affect you, because yeah, if your deliverability is low, then you're like that effort, all that gets wasted. But there are plenty of things that we can do to better improve our deliverability. First thing is authentication related to your domain. You can do this when you're setting up your domain. Next thing is email warm-up, verifying your contacts, the recipients for your outreach pitches, varying up your email text pitches, or using spin tags. And I'm going to talk about all of these. And there are also some aspects of like sending habits and your watching your numbers. And I'm going to go through all of these now. So for authentication, when you get a new domain for that, and you need to set up your emails, you need to set up things called DNS records. Like the MX records are related to mail sending, and there are other, like the A records are related to your like website and things like that. It's a little bit technical, but we have some guides on this, and there's a lot of information about this, and I'm going to talk about it also. But like there are certain records that can better impact your email deliverability. The three are SPF, DKIM, and DMARC records. Setting up the SPF and DKIM records are going to be related to your email provider. So like if you have using Gmail / like Google Workspace or Office 365, you're going to have certain SPF or DKIM records. But regardless, the DMARC, the DMARC record, is not specific to anything. Like there are free DMARC generators tools out there that you can use that'll basically spit out a record that you can add to your DNS wherever that is. Like I have a link to one here, and I'm going to share the slides after this is all over. So you'll have a copy of all this, and because I have a few links that I'm going to share. So for example, like an SPF record for Gmail is something like you'll see the example I have below in like the DNS provider. Like it's a TXT type record, and like you'll see something like SPF1 include, and this basically, like the simplest way to say is this helps the internet know that you are using that, like emails coming from through like Gmail basically are valid. Same for like Zoho and Outlook. And this is like, these are like what some of these records look like if you're setting those up. For DKIM, these are going to be like generated by your email, by the email provider, and they'll tell you to add these records, and they look like just a bunch of a string of characters, and that also helps with authentication. And the last one is like the DMARC record, which like as I mentioned before, you can go to like any generator site for this. Basically, it sets up policies for like quarantining emails and things like that, and it also helps with deliverability, and it's pretty easy to set up. Next thing I want to talk about is email warm-up. So when I'm talking about email warm-up, basically on day one that you have a brand new email account, we don't want to start sending out 50 or 100 emails on the first day. That'll look suspicious, and it increases the likelihood that the email provider, Google or Outlook, suspends the account. So what we need to do is we need to start small and slowly increase the amount of emails that you're sending over time, which looks more natural to the email servers, and it can much better help with your deliverability. Some people will do email warm-up over a few weeks to a month, or sometimes I've seen more. But basically, it's like it starts with just a few emails per day, and then it gradually increases the emails per day over a period of a few weeks, and that can get your, better improve your deliverability. And so after your email is warmed up, you can feel free to be able to send, like however many like the comfortable limit is with your provider, whether it's 50 or 100 or something like that. But mostly max per day, like the common recommendation is like 50 emails per day per email address. Next, for email verification. So if a lot of your emails are bouncing, meaning like you're sending to an email address and it returns undelivered, or like just because like that email address is not a real working email address for a person, that email gets rejected. It bounces. Too many of those can affect your deliverability as well, because it suggests that you don't know who these people are and you're just trying out different email addresses. And so it will, so too many bounced emails can affect your deliverability. There are email verification tools you can use to ensure your recipients' email addresses are valid. Postaga has a built-in email verifier. And so so Postaga also has its own prospecting tools, but it also has, if you have your own list of email addresses, Postaga can verify those to make sure that they're going to valid working email addresses. And for emails that you'll see, if you run it through a verification tool, the email will be either rejected, verified, or it might be flagged as a catch-all. A catch-all means that it's not rejected necessarily by the email server, but it can't 100% guarantee that it's going to reach someone. So there is still a chance that it does bounce. And so if you really want to best ensure that all of your emails are going to real people and not bouncing, you should only email verified working email addresses. Next thing I want to talk about is varying email text or spin tax. So one thing that we've seen sometimes is if you have a very specific, if you have like an email template that varies very little from contact to contact, you haven't done much by way of personalization, and all of your emails look nearly identical, that can also decrease your deliverability. And so one way around that to vary up your emails a little bit is, besides what could be a potentially labor-intensive process of varying up your email significantly, is something called spin tax. And it's another thing that we have built into Postaga. But basically what it lets you do is it lets you rotate between certain phrases in like a sequence. So as an example, if I want to change up the greeting to be like, hey, person's first name, I can alternate between hello, hi, aloha, hey, whatever you want, by using using certain like spin parameters. And like you can use it in multiple places in your pitches to increase the variability as well. So now you have a bunch of different permutations that'll vary for all of the contacts in your campaign. Another thing to talk about is email sending habits. So one thing that I see, unfortunately, a lot of rookie mistakes with is not staggering your email sends. Like some people I've seen use MailChimp for cold email, which I would absolutely never recommend, because like tools like MailChimp or Aweber are just not meant for cold email. Like I think even in their terms of service, they say that everyone that you're reaching out to has to have opted in some way to getting emails from you. And when you send campaigns out with something like MailChimp, even though like it's nice that you can do some personalization for different elements, all those emails go out as like a broadcast email blast, which is fine if it's like a newsletter, but it's not good if it's supposed to be like a one-to-one email from one person to another person. trying to get a response related to whatever your cold outreach pitch is. So the emails need to be sent staggered. Cold outreach platforms know this and they take this all into account. But also, like, if you're like, some people also might try and use like a mail merge tool in like Outlook or something like that. Again, though, similarly, like if you just do a big mail merge to sending one mail merge to like a couple of people, that's fine. But like if you're really trying to do consistent outreach, using like a mail merge thing like that could end up being a problem. In terms of, I talked about this before, don't send out too many emails per day. In general, like 50 seems to be the number that a lot of people are kind of going with. Like I'm setting it so that their max is 50 per day. So in terms of numbers, like, well, what's good deliverability? Overall, I'd say like 95% is the deliverability number that like 95 and above is good for deliverability. Now, like if it's lower, that means like maybe a bunch of your emails are going to spam or you're having a lot of bounces. One way to tell your deliverability is through your open rate. What we're seeing kind of across the board is from cold email, the average open rate being 40%. If you're really dialed in and very tailored, personalized for your prospects, and you can see open rates a lot higher than that. It's possible. But if you're seeing, I would say, an open rate of lower than 40%, then I'm suspicious that there might be an issue with deliverability, or I mean, possibly an issue with prospecting and like who you're finding. But if your open rate, I'd say like, if your open rate is a good deal lower than 40%, there might just be a deliverability issue. If you have any specific questions for want any feedback, feel free also to reach out to me. I'm happy to take a look and see if I can give you recommendations. Next up, I want to talk about prospecting. So prospecting being, how do we find the right people to reach out to? Now, so I can best kind of discuss different like types of prospecting. I'm curious about what everyone in our audience is, most interested in doing outreach for. So I'm going to open up a poll right now. The question is, what are you most interested in doing cold outreach for? Link building, lead generation, PR, or other? And if you're picking other, it would be helpful for me if you would like drop a chat about that. And I know like you may be interested in many of these things, but of these, which is like the one that you are most interested in? All right, and I will close this out in 5 seconds if you haven't responded yet. And we are closing. So results here, link building at 30%, lead generation at a little over half, PR at 11%, and other at 7%. All right, cool, good to know. So let's talk about where we can find leads. So overall, outreach is a numbers game. You'll find that like you may be getting, whatever your like response rates are, you can get more results if you have more people to reach out to. Sure, makes sense. Like some types of outreach may get you a 1 to 2% response rate. And so I'm going to talk about different types of outreach campaigns and getting leads for different goals. So like for link building, for example, a few resources I have. First, a tool like Postaga, we have our own prospecting for link building outreach, finding like resource pages to reach out to, finding guest posting opportunities. And we also have a direct integration with Hrefs. So if you're trying to do like skyscraper technique style link building, our direct integration with that can search for people, pull their backlink profiles, and let you reach out to all of them from our platform and many domains at once, rather than having to go into Hrefs and like do a search, find the backlink profile, export that, and all of that. But beyond that, SEO research tools like Hrefs and SEMrush can help you find good link building outreach related leads as well. For sales leads, this is like a one where you want to find a lot of volume. In particular, the more sales leads you can get, the better. And I know that like it can vary based on like what types of businesses you're looking to connect with. So I'm just gonna kind of talk broadly. Like, so for doing sales lead outreach, if you're looking for like brick and mortar businesses that are oriented around like a certain location, like if I want to find law firms in New York City, Postaga is pretty good for that. But beyond that, what I see like a lot of people doing for lead gen for sales is scraping. In our last webinar, I talked about a tool like Hexamatic, and there are lots of scraping tools out there. But basically, what these tools can do is like scrape databases of different domains or contacts, opportunities like that. There are also like databases you can use, like LeadFuse, and I know some people also use LinkedIn for sales lead gen outreach, and that can involve a lot of actually manual work to do that. For PR leads, like if you want to get press coverage for your business or get featured as a guest on a podcast, two resources I recommend. One is SparkToro, which is a tool that can help you, like basically it says what kind, like what space are you in, and then it can tell you like, all right, if you're looking to find people who are interested in this topic, here is the media that they consume, here are the podcasts they listen to, so you can reach out to them. Also LinkedIn, and I'd also, of course, recommend Postaga in particular for podcast outreach. So getting more leads, how can you scale this effort? So getting a lot more leads consistently really necessitates like building a workflow and a consistent system. So some people that I've seen that like are doing a lot of outreach will have people on their team that are like dedicated to doing outreach, or set aside times that they're specifically focusing on like list building. And so whether it's having someone's job or role or part of their role be oriented around finding leads, like for people that do like cold outreach for sales, it's pretty common that with like larger teams, at least, you have someone whose role is like someone who focuses on finding leads, then another person who focuses on doing the outreach, and another person who focuses on like closing deals and things like that. But if you're talking about like serious volume, this is what like the bigger teams kind of look like. Now I want to talk about pitching, what to actually include in your outreach pitch to get a better response rate. So part one of writing a good pitch. I've talked with like a lot of people who are doing outreach for a variety of things, and these recommendations are kind of from this experience that I've had. I'd say the first thing before you even like write anything, like think about what the goal is that you're looking to get. Are you looking to get, like, what outcome are you looking from this email? Are you looking for them to drop a link into your article? Are you looking for someone to agree to a meeting with you? Or are you looking for them to agree to have you on their podcast? Or what is like outcome that you want from this first email? Because reason that, like, you might be saying like, yeah, well, sure, that makes sense. Like, why are you saying this? Because I've seen too many emails where it's just unclear, like what the person sending the email is, like what their ask is, like what they're hoping the person is going to do. In particular, like for something like sales, you are most likely not going to close the sale on your first email. Your email is going to hopefully start a conversation more than anything else. So getting them to reply, to say that they're like interested in learning a bit more. They're probably not going to say like, oh, wow, like you sent me this email with all this information and a link, and I just went and purchased this product. That's typically not what happens. So being that like, your goal might be to start a conversation, we're working towards that end. Next, and this is something that I found that is particularly helpful, like think about from your recipient's perspective. They're probably getting tons of emails every day, and they're getting an email from you, this person, they have no idea who they are. So how is what you have to say going to benefit them? So like in particular, like I've gotten like a ton of cold emails that are like, dear sir, we can provide outsourced IT services if you need. And here is like a list of the services we provide. Now, I'm not in the market for outsourced IT services, but if I would be, like, I'm not interested in the list of this, or I'm not interested in the prices of these things. What I really want to know is, like, is your company going to be a good fit for my business? Do you have relevant experience to me? And are you going to solve this problem that I have, which is, I don't know what it would be in this situation, but like, that's more what I'm interested in. I don't need a list of your features. So for like link building, for example, like for a lot of like link building, like your ask might be like, I want you to link to my content. How is it going to benefit them? How's it going to benefit their audience? For PR, as a good example, like guest outreach. I know I've seen a good amount of cases, and I've talked with podcast hosts who are like, I get a lot of pitches that are just people sending me their resumes, but that doesn't help me because I don't want to have to craft a podcast episode around this person. What I would rather have is them share what they could talk about and why, and like, that would be relevant to my audience, and like why it would be relevant to my audience. And for sales, I want to focus on the benefits, not the features. You probably hear that a bunch with sales, but I want to focus on the value that like I can provide for them, and how I can, either make their life easier, help them save money, help them save time, and do their job better. One other thing that I'd recommend, if you can, use some personality. There are a lot of bland, cold emails out there, and like I'm sure if you've had a business for long enough, you are going to be getting just a lot of cold pitches that are like pretty generic. And so understanding that this is where your recipient is coming from, and they could spot a generic email a mile away, like, oh, yep, I've seen this kind of pitch before, no thanks. But if you can stand out and give them pause before they instinctively go to archive or delete that email, you'll be much better off. I try and, when I can, insert some humor. It's like one thing I've found works well is like I'll throw in some like puns or things like that, like very mild stuff, but like when the person like opens the email and like skims it and like they'll kind of like do a bit of a double take, like what is this? It's not what I was expecting, but now they are stopping. They are stopping from that automatic like routine of just being like, all right, I can tell this is a cold email, no thanks, delete. But if you can stop them, get them to actually read what you have to say, that increases the likelihood you get a reply much more. And also, in general, being shorter rather than longer can also increase likelihood you get a response as well. So more about pitching, best practices. I don't recommend including any attachments. That can also be bad for your deliverability. Minimize the amount of links and images you have. Like in general, I would say from your email, you want one ask or call to action, which is you want them to like reply saying, yes, I'm interested in this, or yes, I'd love to schedule a call. Like don't give too many options because we want to focus on one specific end goal here. And now I want to talk a little bit about, in terms of call to action, the types of calls to action that we can have. There's specific, open-ended, or interest-oriented, and the reply rates are very different from some research that we've seen. I apologize if this is a little low res. This comes from an infographic we did about cold email, and after the webinar, I'll be sharing the infographic as well. But basically, a specific call to action is, can we chat like tomorrow at 12 p.m. and just give me a yes or no, and we'll go from there. Open-ended call to action is something like, do you have time to meet this week? So very, non-specific, but not really seeing, are you interested? But the interest asking specifically, are you interested? Like, let me know what you think. Like, ask them to ask them if they're interested. It gets, from what the study that we have shown, a much better response rate. So also for writing a good pitch, after you've drafted your pitch, I'd recommend reading it back. Put yourself in the perspective, in the shoes of someone who gets a lot of cold emails every day. Objectively, would you respond to this or would you ignore it? And if possible, have like a colleague read it, not necessarily like a family member, unless they are like in the industry or whatever, but like someone who can just give you kind of honest feedback, like to let you know, like, yeah, like this, either like yeah, that seems good, or like, if I received that email, there's no way I would reply to it. So that can help too. So for pitching specifically for link building outreach, one thing I'd recommend is, like, we want to make sure that, like, we want the win. We want someone to link to our content. From my experience, what I've seen, like, I think a reason that some people have less success is based on the content that they are pitching. And the content that you're trying to build links for, in general, I've seen much better success if you're pitching content that I call it like linkable assets. So like if you have like studies and data, like that's something that other sites readily want to give citations for when they're writing their own articles. And so that kind of thing can be like easy for people to like link to, like they're providing a data point and it's relevant to the article. Perfect. Infographic content as well, I've seen perform very well, as well as like premium style, like lead magnet type content that's like very detailed and very thorough. That I've seen just more success with overall. So in terms of like what else about pitching, for your pitches, I would have follow-up emails. From studies that we've seen, you can have 5 to 10 emails in a sales sequence and like 3 to 5 for everything else. Although I've seen that there's some debate about this now, in that some people are suggesting that, well, if I have like a 10 email sequence that goes out, let's say over a several month period, I'm worried that that might affect my deliverability if I have a sequence that's that long. And so just something to be thinking about as well. But space out the emails, as I mentioned before, staggering is important. And in general, starting your emails to send in the morning tends to do better. But also, I recommend A/B testing your emails and your sequences. I try out different variations, try out something as different as like trying out a different subject line and seeing which gets a better open rate, try out different copy to see which gets a reply rate. You can try out many different variables to see how you can better improve your responses. And so I mentioned before, follow-ups. In our infographic, we pull data on like sales versus link building and like which email like gets a reply. And so you'll see like you can have a campaign that has up to 10 emails and can still get replies. Next, let's talk about lead management. And when I'm talking about lead management, you've done the outreach. Now, what to do about replies and responses and what's normal and what's to be expected. So I want to throw out this poll to everybody. So we have some data on response rates. I'm curious what your guess is to which of these categories has the on average best response rate: link building, lead generation, or PR. And I'm going to keep this open just for, let's say, 15 more seconds, and then I'll close it out. All right. Let's 3, 2, 1, and let's shut it down. So results that people are thinking. So link building, it looks like is tied with PR at 26% and lead generation at 48% if you think that it has the highest response rate. So let's see. So overall, according to one study, the typical like average response rate from outreach is between 7 to 17%. They found that a 7% average if there is no personalization, but up to a 17% response rate if there is personalization. This comes from one particular study. Not sure. I'm not sure about like the parameters of it, but I guess I would just agree to the extent that personalizing content does make it much more likely you get a response. Another study that we saw said the cold email response rate is between 1 to 5%. I know that differs significantly, but I want to talk about what we've seen in the data that we have. Now, let's keep in mind that this is among a wide variety of people with different experience levels doing outreach. So some may be more advanced, some may be more inexperienced. But the numbers that we have, sales actually, from what we've seen, has like the lowest average reply rate, and that ranges between 1 to 5%. Now, some people who do this every day might be seeing a much higher response rate, in particular if they are doing a lot of personalization. I know some people that are like this is their job can see can see higher response rates. Link building, we've seen better average response rates between 4 to 10%. And yeah, again, like it varies with experience levels and things like that. But from what we've seen also overall is like PR on average between these different categories of campaigns has a higher response rate, typically between 7.5 to 15%, which was, yeah, kind of interesting to see. So these are like, so if you are like running your first outreach campaigns and you're kind of like looking for some benchmarks or ideas, this might be a place for you to start. But there are a lot of things that can affect your response rates. Obviously, deliverability. Are your emails reaching inboxes? If not, then you're going to have a lower response rate. And you can tell, you can tell deliverability by open rate. If you have a low open rate, then there might be issues with deliverability. Also, your prospecting can affect response rate. If you are just mass reaching out to people indiscriminately, that people that might not be a good fit, you're just like reaching out to any business, then it might be also like you might see a lower response rate as opposed to reaching out to someone with like some category of types of business or website with a specific end in mind. So like, are the contacts that you're reaching out to relevant to your pitch? And about the pitch, is the pitch any good? How personalized is the pitch to your contacts? Now I want to talk about like common outreach responses. So if you're sending outreach campaigns, what are things that you can expect? People who are interested, they might just be vague to say like, okay, tell me more. And you're like, well, I had this whole email where I told you about this, tell me more. But that is a common positive response that we've seen kind of across the board. And so all right, I guess I have to like rehash this a little bit, but what I've already kind of included, but all right, I will share more. No thanks. Also a very common response. It happens, I guess we're not a good fit. That's fine. And also unsubscribe. And if someone asks you specifically to unsubscribe or to stop, you should 100% remove them from your sequence. And if you have a blacklist, adding them to that blacklist so they don't get any future emails from you. This is also important for certain legal requirements. So like for US's Can Spam Act, if someone specifically asks to unsubscribe, you need to opt them out. Another common response, let me loop someone else in. Basically like, all right, so we don't have the right person, but they want to bring in someone else because they think this might be relevant for them. Great. But that also means that we're going to have to follow up here because they've CC'd someone else and they may not have much of an idea of what you're looking for. For link building, we have very specific responses that we typically see. One is the ask for an exchange. I will link to you if you link to me, or I want to do an ABC link exchange where I will link to your website that you asked for, but I want you to link to my other website because I don't want a direct reciprocal one-to-one exchange. In terms of what you can expect or what you is it okay to do this? In general, I would say that if you're doing link building at a seriously high volume, well, you are going to get a lot of people asking for an exchange because they want something in return for you getting a link. So yeah, it might be they want a link also. It might be them asking for money. But the best practice is if you're going to do an exchange, instead of doing a one-to-one direct exchange, if you have another website, another property that you can use as well, you can offer that, like, all right, if you link to me, I will link to, another site of yours, or if you link to this site of mine, I'll link to you from another site of ours, or something like that, to minimize the direct one-to-one exchange. Although if you're not doing a crazy amount of volume, the direct reciprocal exchange, I don't think will be the worst for you in terms of like, is it going to be like harmful in terms of like the link not being worth anything. Another common response is pay me money. The prices that we've seen can range drastically from as little as $15 to as much as like $1,000. And some sites where I've seen them ask for a recurring payment. The more outreach you do, the more you'll like be able to like recognize these. I'm currently trying to work on an article that breaks down like the typical average prices that we're seeing based, and like the main factors that like I think are relevant are like, what's the site's domain rating or domain authority based on stats that we get from Ahrefs or Moz? How much traffic does that website have? And does that site look like legit, that it's relevant, or does it look suspicious, like it's like a link farm or something like that, in which case I don't want any links from them. Another common response for link building is I can't give you a link because of some arrangement that I have, but you can write a guest post. And great, if you can write a guest post, you can get a link in that guest post. Common responses for sales outreach: follow up with me after X day, but I might not be interested later. In that case, add them to your CRM and make a reminder to follow them at a later date. Another common thing is, I'm not the best person to talk to. You should talk to this person. And they would give you their email address. And so then you'd reach out to that person and, mention the other person who recommended you and say like, so this way it doesn't feel like a completely cold outreach. It's like, hey, I got someone else on your team recommended I get in touch with you, and here's what we could talk about. Another common response for sales is, what do you do? And you're like, all right, well, I thought I made it clear in my first email, but let me talk about a bit more about what we do, and like we can see if we're like a good fit based on that. And another common response is, do you have any materials to share? So one thing I'd recommend in particular for a lot of these like varieties of campaigns is having materials ready to go to share. Another common response is, let's have a call, and then you could send them your calendar. For PR, probably the most common like positive response is, here's my scheduling link, let's schedule a call. Or they might pivot to say like, well, I think there's some other opportunities here for co-marketing, so let's see what we can do. And then another response that's common is, if you pay me dollars for some sponsorship, we can do more extensive coverage for your business. And another common response is like, all right, I'll feature your business in our directory or whatever, but I don't want to do the work. You give me the content. And that's a common one too. So I would like, if I were you, I would just have content ready to go so that you could provide it for them. And then another one, like, hey, let's like, not interested now, but let's follow up next month. And so add them to your CRM, follow them up later. So preparing for leads, how to best manage it. I would sign up for a calendaring scheduling app like SavvyCal or Calendly, because you will want to be able to schedule calls with the leads who respond positively. And for link building and PR, and I guess also sales to some degree, if you have materials, like have it ready in like a swipe file, like of like resources that you can share, so you can get them what they need from you as easily as possible. And also like using a CRM is super helpful to manage all of these leads and knowing, about following up with them and business like that. So we covered a lot in a short amount of time. But like next steps, where to go from here. If you have, and we're going to talk about Q&A shortly, but if you have any questions, we're always here to help and brainstorm if you have any things you want ideas or suggestions on. Most every week we have a weekly office hours call, and I'll send the links to that in the follow-up email for this. And And also, like, as I mentioned earlier, we have our own outreach team here. And if you just find that you don't have the time to do outreach yourself for either your business or your agency, we have a done for you service that you can check out as well. And like for that, like what we've done is we'll do outreach campaigns either for your business, or if you're a digital agency and you want to start doing like link building or PR for your clients, we also can work on behalf of agencies with multiple clients. And the variety of types of campaigns that we'll do is outreach for building links, for guest posting, for finding affiliates, which is popular for like either SaaS or e-commerce businesses, press coverage, getting a podcast guest spots, and also depending on the type of business, we can possibly do sales lead generation. So one last poll I want to throw to you is, would you like us to follow up with you after the webinar? I'm just going to open this poll real quick. If you want us to follow up, I'll get in touch. Yeah, I'll just leave this open for a little bit, and then we'll get on to the next. Great, and just a few more seconds. And I am going to close this up. And next, we got a lot of questions, and thanks for asking those, and we'll get to Q&A now. If you have to drop off, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be sending out the recording and the materials tomorrow. Now let's get on to this Q&A here. Is there a daily limit we should stay under, or if we're only using a single domain? I would recommend per email address, typically like 50 emails per day. I know some people recommend, like some people say they can get like up to 100, based on like different email providers. But just a good rule of thumb, I'd say, is about 50. That's a common question we've had. So yeah, how many emails max? 50 per email address. Max number of emails. Yeah. So I got a bunch more. So Will asks about for B2B, depending on the industry, it doesn't seem like a cold outreach sales outbound campaign would work with a 1 to 5% response rate. How many contacts should you try before you draw that conclusion? So I will say that for B2B, like for sales lead generation, a big question about whether it is workable is going to depend on the value of your product and the typical like the lifetime value of that you get from any new customer. Like if you have like a software that goes for like $20 a month, and like the average customer of yours spends 20 to 50 a month or something like that, the numbers are just, it's not really workable. Sales lead gen, in my experience, works best with higher ticket products and services. So typically, like where the customer value like you're getting is several hundred to several $1,000s per month. Like if you're getting like 1,000 plus per month from a new customer, that's like a good target for lead generation. So that's why a lot of like agencies or IT companies with like bigger ticket sales, bigger ticket sales are very popular for for lead gen. A question, let's see. Is there an issue using Google Mail for Business, using your own domain? You can use, so Google Workspace or Google Workspace, Outlook, or like Zoho using like a business domain is fine. Yeah, that's perfectly fine. There are no issues there. Is there an easy button to set up DNS and MX, SPF, all of that? Unfortunately, not really. From Jamil, no matter what, you're going to need to set up some DNS records. In particular, like the MX records are what sends the emails out. So like it does need to be done. But there are like video guides for basically every DNS provider to like walk you through how to add DNS records. So if you have Namecheap DNS records, if you have Cloudflare DNS records, there are a lot of guides on how to add those. Is there an automated tool to do that kind of record setup? Unfortunately, there is not. Let's see. Let's see. Next question. David asks, so if I have multiple emails at a same domain, should we limit the inboxes for that, like email 1 at domain or email 2 at domain? That's a good question. And I will say that I know some people who, out of an abundance of caution, I know some people who will only use one email at one domain and have many domains and just one email at that domain because of the concerns that they have about. Really, the concern is like if my account gets shut down by Google or Outlook, and that affects if that can affect the whole thing, then that'll be a problem for all the other email addresses there. But I don't have specific like personal experience to say that like having multiple emails at a domain would be a problem. Questions about how to do email verification. So there, from Zane, so there are many email tools that just do email verification. Postaga has email verification also built in. So if you have a list of emails, you could throw it into a Postaga campaign and Postaga will verify those for you. Let's see, from Ryan, any suggestions if you get flagged as a spammer and need to get out of the mess? Yes. So if you can't, like, if you have if you need the domain to be using it, like if you have this domain that like it's associated with like your main brand and you are on some spam lists, and you need to use it, that is a challenge, but it is doable. The most common thing that people will do is they'll just burn that domain, like not use it again. They'll be like, okay, well, this domain has bad deliverability now. I'm just gonna give up on it and throw in a new domain. So like that's typically like the usual go-to. But if you need to use that domain moving forward, some things that you can do are like basically really try like re-warming up the domain, starting with low email volume, and trying to like warm it back up, to have good, consistent emails, like, and like get that are getting replied to and things like that. And like, for the time being, like, if you're like getting that flagged, stop using that for cold outreach until we've like rehabilitated that domain. I've got a bunch of, it seems like I have a lot of questions about like the technical for setting up like DKIM, DMARC, and SPF records. So depending on like the platform, like where your email is, if it's like with Google Workspace or Outlook, they have resources for which of those records you should be adding and where. But I also know that like the domain that you have and the DNS can be living on any number of platforms. Yeah, that's kind of like what I would check the resources of those, and there are like resources available for every single DNS provider and every single like email host as well. Any tools for setting up DMARC? Yes, and I have it in an earlier slide. And I'll send this. I'm going to send the slides also, so you'll have them. But yeah, there are tools for setting up DMARC. Like the tool that I recommend is, I think it's like the first one I found in a search for DMARC generator. It's pretty straightforward. It like asks you a series of questions like, where should the DMARC report go to, and things like that. A question Michael has about, if I use Postaga for cold outreach and then take those people who did not bounce and import the clean list into constant contact for the remaining warm list, does it affect my domain email for anyone who's reporting me as spam, since it was sent through constant contact? So really, an issue with a tool like Constant Contact or like MailChimp is using that email, like using that provider. They've got their own IP address that your email is coming from, and all the other email servers know who Constant Contact's IPs are, who MailChimp's IPs are, and they're going to treat any emails coming from Constant Contact or MailChimp as mass emails, and it can be bad for your deliverability because because like all those emails are going to typically get sent out as a blast, and it's just an increased likelihood that your deliverability will be bad because of that. And yeah, it's more likely that you can end up in spam, or like at best you're going to end up in like the promotional folders of, if someone has like Gmail, because it's like, oh, that's sent via Constant Contact. This is of course a like promotional email or something like that. So like Constant Contact may have something like 99% deliverability. Like they'll have good deliverability, but if they catch you using using Constant Contact for cold emails for people who have not specifically opted in, they will most likely terminate the account, because it like part of their terms of service are you have to be only emailing people who have opted in, and like their deliverability rates and things like that are like in mind are related to like people who are sending these broadcast newsletter type emails, right? They're like, it's specifically for people who have opted in subscribers to their newsletters. And it's like so like their 99% deliverability is what it is, because like if they're seeing like people if they're seeing people unsubscribe or bounce, they'll remove them from those campaigns. But if you are sending cold emails, you're going to typically have a much higher like unsubscribe rate or things like that, or much higher likelihood that someone like reports as spam. And I just don't think it's a good sustainable long-term solution, because you're probably going to get a ban from the service. So I want to be mindful of time. So I very much appreciate everyone joining on today. If you have any follow-up questions or I wasn't able to get to it, please feel free to reach out. You can reach us at support@postaga.com, and I'm happy to talk more about that. And yeah, please feel free to reach out with any questions you have. Following up, I will send the recording of this, which you'll get tomorrow, along with the slides, as well as some other resources and related to things that we talked about today. So thank you all very much. I really appreciate you joining today. I appreciate all these great questions. I hope you got some value out of it. I hope you learned some things. I really appreciate it. So thank you all, and have a great rest of your day.